Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take something you're curious about, look at the sources you found, and, well, pull at the really fascinating bits for you.
Exactly. No information overload, just those surprising facts, those aha moments.
And today we're stepping into ancient Japan. We've got a YouTube transcript from you analyzing the Hotsuma Tsutae.
Right. A text that gives a very different spin on Japanese history compared to what most people know.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore what this Hotsuma Tsutae says, especially compared to the standard chronicles, the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki.
Yeah, the video we're looking at really emphasizes that. So the Hotsuma Tsutae presents this unique history and even hints at, well, something pretty significant, a worst incident in Japan's past.
Okay, a worst incident. Intriguing. So the analysis starts with Narito, Shinto ritual prayers.
That's right. It focuses specifically on purification prayers, the Harai Kotoba, and the main one, the Harai no Kotoba.
Okay, for anyone listening who isn't, super familiar with Shinto, what's the basic idea behind these purification prayers?
Well, think of it like cleansing. Getting rid of sins, impurities, spiritual grime, basically. So you're pure when you approach the deities, the kami.
Got it. And the video mentions 4 deities linked to this. The Harai no Kami.
Yes. Seori-hime, Hayase Sutsuhime, Izanagi, and no Kami. They're the specialists in purification, you could say.
And here's where it gets interesting. According to the video, Seori-hime, she's one of these 4, but she's barely mentioned in the Kojiki or Nihon Shoki.
Right. Largely absent from the big official chronicles.
But the Hotsuma Tsutae, it puts her front and center, gives her a major role.
Exactly. That's the discrepancy the video highlights. Why would a major purification deity be sidelined in the standard texts, but elevated in this one? It's a big question.
It suggests maybe different factions or beliefs shaping which stories got told or how.
Could be. Different political climates, different religious priorities when these texts were being compiled. It definitely hints at something more complex going on beneath the surface.
Okay, so back to the Harai no Kotoba, the Great Purification Prayer. The video claims a big chunk of it, detailing some kind of dark history, got cut out over time.
That's the argument. That parts were omitted, maybe because the content seemed, outdated or discriminatory to later generations.
And the video says the Hotsuma Tsutae actually lines up with these missing sections.
Precisely. As if the Hotsuma Tsutae preserves that older, perhaps less comfortable version of the story. It might hold the key to understanding those hidden bits of mythology.
So what were these sins in the omitted parts? The video mentions 2 kinds.
Yeah, Amatsumi, those are heavenly sins, stuff committed by the celestial gods.
Gods committing sins? That sounds pretty radical.
It is. And then Kunitsuumi, earthly sins, committed by earthly deities or figures. It implies a time when even the gods were believed to mess up, basically.
Why would later versions maybe want to erase that idea, keep the gods looking perfect?
That's a strong possibility. Maybe later rulers or compilers wanted a more pristine image of the divine to, shore up their own legitimacy. Flawed gods might seem destabilizing.
So, examples of these heavenly sins, the Amatsumi, the video mentions messing up irrigation ditches.
Yes, and flaying a living horse, pretty brutal stuff.
And defecating in sacred places.
Right, which, as the video points out, sounds a lot like the stories about Susanoo's bad behavior in the Kojiki, doesn't it?
It really does. So there's a parallel there, a shared idea of what divine troublemaking looked like.
Seems so. Even if the emphasis changed later. Maybe there were warnings or metaphors for real societal problems back then.
Okay, then the earthly sins, Kunitsuumi, hurting people, living or dead, makes sense. But then there's this sin of the white person, Shirabito Natsumi.
And the sin of the disabled person, Imunashibito Natsumi. Yeah, those are much more ambiguous.
The video says modern interpretations link them to illnesses.
Often, yes. But why frame them as sins originally? It's puzzling. Maybe it reflects old prejudices or ways of explaining things they didn't understand, blaming misfortune on moral failings. Linking them to illness later might be a way to soften potentially uncomfortable original meanings.
But the video really zeroes in on a cluster of sins called Oka Serutsumi, incestuous acts.
Yes, causing to lie with. Various parent-child combinations. The video notes these seem to make up a large part of the omitted list.
Why such a focus? Was this a major taboo or a real problem they were grappling with?
It suggests it was a significant concern, at least within the traditions feeding into that prayer. The Harai no Kotoba in its original form, seems to have been deeply worried about these specific transgressions.
And the video connects one of these, the sin involving one's own mother, directly to the Hotsuma Tsutae, Emperor Kaika marrying his mother.
Exactly. It's presented as a historical example from the Hotsuma Tsutae, illustrating one of the very sins listed in the potentially older version of the prayer.
Wow, so the Hotsuma Tsutae might be giving us a less sanitized look at early beliefs about family and relationships.
That seems to be the implication, a view that later, more official narratives might have preferred to gloss over.
Okay, let's shift them. The video dives into the main narrative of the Hotsuma Tsutae concerning Amaterasu, or Amateru Kami, as she's called here.
Right, and her selection of 12 kisaki, or consorts.
And even her origin is different here, isn't it? Raised in the north, not born in heaven.
Totally different. Raised by Tanokami, Koromonokami, and Kitakami, the North Country. Then she moves her base to Fuji. Right away, it signals a major break from the standard myths.
And this rule, a goddess, Ki, and a human, Mi, ruling together as Kimi, the emperor.
Yeah, this ancient concept. So Amaterasu the Ki needed a Mi, a human consort or partner, to rule effectively.
What does that tell us about how they viewed leadership back then?
It suggests this duality was crucial, a divine side for spiritual authority and a human side for connection to the earth, maybe practical governance. A blend of heaven and earth in the ruler.
So they hold this selection process, lots of deities involved, and they pick 12 kisaki, representing directions, ranked, sounds formal.
Very. Suke was the top rank, then Utsutami, then Oshi. Probably reflecting power structures in her court. It wasn't random.
The video highlights two key pairs among the 12. First, Mochiko and her sister Wakuko. Mochiko's father was Kojiki-no-Mikoto, Izanagi's brother. That's a high connection.
Very high. Izanagi, one of the original creator gods. And Mochiko gets the top rank, Suki for the north, the root direction. Wakuko is Utsutami. Their initial prominence is important later.
Then the other pair, Seori-hime, called Hanoko here, and her sister Hanako. Seori-hime's father was descended from the mountain god Chiamasumi.
Yes, Sakuruchi-no-Mikoto. So Seori-hime Hanoko also has a powerful lineage. Yeah. And she's presented as the really key figure here.
She gets the highest rank, Suken, for the south sundown direction. Hanako is Utsutame. And she's the one introduced to Amaterasu's main territory.
Right. And Amaterasu's reaction is immediate. Intense attraction. Chooses Hanoko, Seori-hime, as the central consort, the Uchitsuyo or Nakatsuyo, almost instantly.
More than just attraction, the video says Amaterasu did something unprecedented.
She did. She came down from her high seat to meet Seori-hime eye to eye. Took her hand, led her to the inner palace herself, a huge gesture.
And that's where Seori-hime gets that title, Amesagur Himuka Hime.
The goddess who caused Amaterasu to descend and face her. Yes, it really underlines her impact from the very beginning.
And just to remind ourselves, Seori-hime is this Mizuchi, this water deity, dragon god, river god, worshipped locally but missing from the main texts.
Exactly. So the Hotsuma Tsutae becomes crucial if you want to understand her significance in this alternative history.
Okay, so Amaterasu and Seori-hime are ruling. The video briefly mentions Tonokami dies, the capital moves from Fuji to Aiz, Izawa no Miya.
Right. And Mochiko has a son, Amanahoshi-no-Mikoto. The video notes that other stories say he's Amaterasu's second child, but here, Hotsuma Tsutae says he's Mochiko's.
Another key difference in the family tree. And Seori-hime has her child, Oshimi, in Issei.
These details matter. They paint a different picture of the relationships and succession lines in that early divine court.
But then things take a dark turn. The video signals a major conflict is coming, linked back to those sins from the Hurano no Koba. This sounds like that worst incident.
It does. And interestingly, the Hotsuma Tsutae mentions Amaterasu setting up laws, the Hara no Michi, for crime and punishment before the famous Taihu Code. Suggests a developed legal sense even then.
Then trouble arrives. Tsutsunu-no-Kami rushes in with bad news from Nenokuni, the land of roots.
And it starts with Kojiki-no-Mikoto, the lord there, Izanami's brother. He married a human woman, Sashimi.
Okay, mixing divine and human again.
And he really favored Sashimi and also her brother Kunimi.
Kunimi. The video links him to those earthly sins, Kunitsuumi, maybe the disabled person sin.
That's the interpretation the video offers, yes. Trying to connect those abstract sins to actual characters in this story.
So Kojiki-no-Mikoto appoints this human, Kunimi, as a high official, a Masuhito. But power corrupts.
Big time. Kunimi neglects his duties, starts extorting people. It goes downhill fast.
And after Kojiki-no-Mikoto dies, Kunimi brings in another figure, this white person, the Shirabido.
Yes, appoints him as an official too. directly linking to that Shirobito no Tsumi, the sin of the white person. Again, suggesting these sins might refer to disruptive human individuals.
This white person marries Kurokuhime, who is Kuki-no-Mikoto and Sashimi's daughter, gaining influence.
That's all political maneuvering and ambition, but then comes the betrayal. After Kuki-no-Mikoto is buried, the white person dumps Sashimi and Kurokuhime, sends them back to Kunimi.
And then Kunimi, he assaults them, his own sister and niece.
Yes, a truly horrific act. That's the core of the injustice, the worst incident.
Just awful. So Tsutsunushi reports this to Amaterasu. She summons them all to Takamanohara, the High Plane event.
Time for divine judgment. Kanasaki no Mikoto, or Sumiyoshi, questions Kunimi.
And Kunimi denies it, claims Sashimi was his wife, even fakes a divorce document.
Unbelievable nerve. But Kanasaki lays out all his crimes. Betrayal, incest, forgery, inappropriate relations with his niece.
The video mentions a point system for sins in the Hotsuma Tsutae.
Apparently so. Forgetting favors, incest, forgery, Kunimi racks up 370 points. The death penalty threshold was 360.
So judgment is swift.
Immediate execution and imprisonment. No messing around there.
Okay, what about the white person? He gets summoned to.
Yes. Questioned by Yakino Mikoto, he tries to deny everything, claims the women left on their own, boasts about his past service.
But Yaki sees through it, accuses him of relations with his stepmother Sashimi while married to her daughter, then banishing them both.
Exactly. His point total, even higher, 410 points.
Wow. So he's speechless, in prison too.
Right. And Amaterasu restores order by appointing Yaki and his wife Shiriyama Hime as the new rulers, the Masuhito of Nei-no-Kuni. Justice served, order restored. Or so it seems.
But the video throws in a twist. This wasn't just Kunimi and the white person. Mochiko was pulling the strings, out of jealousy for Seori-hime.
That's the reveal. And it turns out Mochiko was also Kuki-no-Mikoto's daughter, but with a different mother. So she knew the situation in Nei-no-Kuni intimately.
And the Hotsuma Tsutae describes her transforming into an orochi, a 9-headed serpent.
Yes. Driven by jealousy, she reveals this monstrous true form. It elevates the conflict beyond simple court intrigue.
What could that symbolize? The destructive nature of jealousy.
Probably. How resentment can twist someone into something monstrous, threatening the whole divine order.
So Mochiko's plan was to undermine Seori-hime using pawns like this white person called Kuromi here.
And she was clever. Arranged strategic marriages, like marrying her half-sister Kurakuhime to Amenoshi no Mikoto from Sakuchida, and his sister to her own brother, building power.
Then she uses Amenoshi Kohi's new influence to get Kunimi and the white person off the hook. Death sentences reduced to banishment.
Exactly. Seems like luck for them, but it was all Mochiko's manipulation.
And then, coincidentally, Kunimi and the white person end up banished to Sakuchida, where Amenoshi Kohi takes them and gives them power again.
The video stresses, not a coincidence at all part of Mochiko's plan.
And just to complicate things further, Susanoo shows up in Sakuchida, supposedly to help govern.
But the video hints his own problematic history is about to cause more trouble. He's a volatile element.
So Susanoo is there, he sees this woman, Haisothime, wants to marry her, but gets rejected because he doesn't have an official title.
Right. And while he's waiting for her final answer, he stays with Wakuko, Mochiko's sister, one of Amaterasu's Kisaki.
Oh boy. And he ends up having relations with Wakuko, breaking her vow.
He does. A major breach of protocol and trust within Amaterasu's circle.
So Amaterasu finds out, tells Mochiko and Wakuko to take a rest, basically dismisses them.
A gentle but firm removal from their positions.
But Mochiko doesn't care. She feels powerful now with her allies.
Exactly. She and Wakuko start plotting to overthrow Amaterasu, planning to use Susanoo.
And Toyohime replaces them as a consort, which just makes Susanoo even angrier.
Furious. He sees it as an insult, vows revenge on Amaterasu. He's easily manipulated by his anger.
Mochiko and Wakuko egg him on, telling him he should be ruler.
Playing right into his ego and resentment. It's textbook manipulation.
But Hanako, Seori-hime's sister, she sees Susanoo's rage building and warns Seori-hime.
Yes, Hanako is observant. And Seori-hime, already knowing about the plot, acts decisively while Amaterasu is away. She summons the sisters.
And her decision is surprisingly merciful. Banishment, but under care.
Extremely merciful. They're sent to live under Akatsuchi no Mikoto's care in Tsukushi, Kyushu. And Seori-hime herself offers to raise Mochiko's child, Kohi no Mikoto.
She even tells him to take the 3 daughters Wakuko had with Amaterasu.
Right, an attempt to keep the family connected, ensure the children are cared for, trying to de-escalate, really.
But the sisters refuse. Too angry.
Consumed by bitterness, yes. They refuse to care for the daughters.
So Toyohime steps up and takes them. These daughters become the Munakata Sanjojin.
That's what the video highlights from the Hotsuma Tsutae, another huge revelation. The famous Munakata goddesses are daughters of Amaterasu and Wakuko in this version, completely different lineage.
Wow. Okay, so Mochiko and Wakuko are banished, sent to Hikawa, and their resentment just grows.
Until it culminates in those terrifying transformations.
Mochiko becomes the nine-headed Orochi, Wakuko the Yamata no Orochi, these legendary monsters born from jealousy and resentment in this telling.
And they gather followers. Kunimi, the white person, formed this evil army spreading corruption. It's chaos.
Meanwhile, Susanoo hears about the banishment, flies into a rage again, totally misunderstanding Seori-hime's mercy.
Completely. He sees it as an attack, not compassion. His anger takes over.
And that's when he commits those acts. Sowing seeds in the shrine, throwing the horse, defiling the other shrine.
Yes, the acts that mirror those ancient Amatsutsume, the heavenly sins. He's living out that pattern of divine transgression.
Hanako sees him, tries to close the shrine door.
But he breaks through the roof, throws the flayed horse inside.
And Hanako is killed. Hit by a weaving tool. How awful.
Truly tragic. And that's the trigger for the Amano Iwato story of the Hotsuma Tsutae. It wasn't just Amaterasu being upset. Her beloved weaver, Seori-hime's sister Hanako, was killed by Susanoo. That's why she retreats into the cave.
That adds such a personal, tragic dimension to the cave myth. So she retreats, world goes dark.
The deities grieve. Amaterasu is furious, but also compassionate. She sings a song to Susanoo, yes, instead of attacking him. A song about harmony, male and female unity, the god's duty to nurture humanity, trying to guide him.
But Susanoo's still too angry. Rejects it.
Completely. Still lost in rage.
And that's what finally drives her into the cave completely.
Yeah.
Despair.
Right. Rolled in darkness. Then you get Amano Uzume's famous dance, Waikan's plan, the offerings, all the efforts to lure her out.
And that song the entertainers sing, about Tachibana oranges in Fuji, the ideal land.
The video notes a hidden meaning there. Even though Amaterasu, the key, is absent, the essence, the Miya, of Seori-hime is still present. Like her fragrance, her influence, offering hope.
The gods cheer, Amaterasu peeks out.
Amaterasu pulls her out, seals the cave. Light returns. Phew.
Okay, but now Susanoo has to face the music. The trial.
Multiple trials, the text says, given how much he did wrong. He's almost killed at one point, but a letter arrives.
A letter prompted by Seori-hime's prayer, which brings Hanako back to life.
Incredible, right? Hanako resurrected. So Susanoo needs a retrial.
Seori-hime's power and compassion are just immense here. How does that change things?
It reframes the whole idea of justice. It's not just punishment. She argues for understanding, for mercy.
She even sings another song, explaining Susanoo's nature, linking it to his mother Izanami conceiving him during an unlucky time.
Yes, basically saying his nature isn't entirely his fault, it's tied to these cosmic rhythms. She pleads for a way to correct him, not just destroy him.
And the other gods listen, because of her love.
Her profound compassion sways them. So the retrial leads not to death, but expulsion. Banishment from Takamanahara. His journey of wandering begins.
So that was the consequence, but tempered by mercy.
Exactly. And the video really stresses. The Hotsuma Tsutae shows Seori-hime's compassion is why Susanoo was spared, a detail missing elsewhere.
And it ends with that wisdom from Izanagi and Izanami about conception. Timing, purification, prayer, aligning with nature for good offspring.
Right. Tying it back to respecting natural cycles for positive outcomes, even in creating life. It offers a window into that worldview.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, looking back at the video's analysis of the Hotsuma Tsutae, we've seen some really striking points.
Definitely. Seori-hime's central, compassionate role is huge. The darker side of the gods, their sins, jealousies, betrayals, it feels much more human in a way.
And those alternative versions of big myths, like Amano Iwato having Hanako's death as the trigger, it changes the whole feel.
It really does. The Hotsuma Tsutae, through this lens, offers a fascinating, sometimes unsettling, alternative perspective on Japanese origins. It fills in gaps, maybe, or offers radically different interpretations.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What does it mean if the stories we usually hear might have deliberately downplayed figures like Seori-hime or smoothed over the messy parts?
How does knowing about these divine dramas, these potential worse incidents, change how you might view early Japanese society, their beliefs about power, family, justice?
Yeah, and it leaves us with this final thought for you to chew on. If this one text, the Hotsuma Tsutae, holds such a different version of events?
What other hidden histories, other forgotten stories, or alternative viewpoints might still be out there just waiting to be uncovered? Makes you want to keep digging, doesn't it?